and there is the World Poverty Day, a day meant to address factors that are actually driving poverty issues across the globe. These 3 days, these 4 days are actually interconnected in one way or another, because disasters are defined. Disasters and disaster vulnerabilities, again, continue to worsen the landscape around poverty. And it's important, again, to see also how globally this is also being counteracted on. The theme for this particular year of the International Day of Disaster Risk Reduction, which was commemorated on October 13th, was Fund Resilience, Not Disasters. And it's quite a telling theme. It's a telling theme because it comes at a time when developed countries are sort of receding to themselves, prioritizing interests of their local communities, and where, again, there is serious climate denial. The fund for addressing losses and damages, which are interconnected with the occurrences of disaster risk reduction and disaster risks, again, since inception, has not grown beyond 800 million US dollars. The fund, and therefore remains grossly underfunded and unable to respond to any critical issue that relates to disasters as a result of climate change in any of the country. For instance, if we picked on Cyclone Freddy in Malawi, the response on itself costed more than what is actually in the kitty for responding to losses and damage. And since Dubai, again, there has been minimal efforts globally to replenish that particular kit. Yet, globally, and as the world commemorated the International Day of Disaster Risk Reduction, there was an overarching call to increase the funding for disaster risk reduction, particularly drawing from both private and public funding. These are things that we are grappling with, even as we commemorate the Global Week of Action this particular year, a time when there is a lot of global denial of the vulnerabilities of communities to disasters, and how disasters are pushing communities deeper into poverty, which is something that we cannot, at this point, ignore. But a majority of the communities who are also being pushed into poverty are women. When you look at the most vulnerable communities, those who are in the fridges, and those who are struggling with the basics, and those who, again, have never been in the mainstream of national and global economic priorities, it's women. And their systems are, again, exposed to extreme vulnerability. And again, when you look at the International Day of Rural Women, which was October 15th, this particular year, again, looked at how best we can actually cultivate resilience and drive sustainable change for rural women. That was the overarching theme for this particular year. And then we begin to see, where are the connections? How do you really deal with the question of resilience for women when you are not even financing adaptation question, which is so important, and when the resilience conversation agenda and the mitigation agenda are also not converging with women interests and women aspirations, which is something that we must, again, in this particular conversation, and as we drive the climate and economic justice campaign, we must be quite bold enough to ask, where do we connect with this aspiration, and how do we drive it in a much more fundamental way? Within the African Union, the theme of the International Day of Rural Women was tempered with slightly, again, to carry the reparation justice agenda, which is the overarching theme of the African Union this particular year, looking for how best to advance inclusive, sustainable agri-food system within the context of empowering rural women for reparatory justice. So when you begin looking at how the theme, again, was tempered with, then you begin to see the intricate interconnection between the climate justice campaign and the theme for the International Women Day, Rural Women Day this year, and particularly when you connect it with the reparation agenda, which, again, is also being highly opposed in the global spaces. And therefore, keen questions around how we drive the reparation agenda within the context of the climate and economic justice becomes quite important. And connecting that, again, with the with the World Food Day, again, Africa is a continent with a lot of vulnerabilities. And the vulnerabilities are playing within two sectors which are quite important, and that is the agriculture sector, the water sector. And these sectors sit at the heart of creating resilient livelihoods for communities. So when you begin looking at how to create peaceful, sustainable, and prosperous food secure Africa, you go back to the bigger question of one, how has agriculture been impacted historically from policy frameworks that are actually imposed from outside the continent? And how is this working out? You begin to look at how land grabbings by multinationals who are also keen to dominate African agriculture interests are working out. You begin to look at the landscape of the fertilizers, which are inorganic, imported from outside the continent, and that are also draining meager resources that is needed to build resilience. You begin to connect the conversations around food production with the challenge around the control of the seed sector, with the challenge of externally imposed food production systems that confer little benefits to the local community. And within the trade discourse, then you begin to connect these conversations again with CBAM, which are carbon border adjustment mechanisms and the implications of this to our global exports. And therefore, very important for us to see these interconnections and how we push back on them. Yet again, the theme for the World Food Day this year is actually hand in hand for a better food and better future. So who is holding the hand of who is a bigger question. And are they holding the hand to collaborate in the direction they walk, or are they holding hand together, holding each other's hand and one as an overarching influence in terms of the direction that they take? But connecting all this then to the theme of the World Poverty Day is the underpinning issue, the issue of dignity for all, the issue of advancing social justice, and the issue of really advancing equal opportunities. And therefore, we begin to ask across the spectrum and across the population that are most impacted by disasters, the women who are more vulnerable, our food producer systems, how are we really ensuring that we are reforming policies within the financial, the economic systems, the debt traps, to ensure that there is opportunity for social justice and to ensure that we can secure dignity that we are looking for. I think these are the imperatives this conversation is about, and basically looking again at all these constituents who are impacted and how we can actually mobilize them, hear their voice, and their voice to drive inherent contribution towards the climate and economic justice campaign. I want to stop there. No, thanks.
Thank you so much, Philip, for that very insightful reflection. Yes, people's first and delivered now, and we as Africa, we should move to power, poverty to power, and raise our voices in global reforms. Colleagues from Philip Reflection, let's also remind ourselves that this is a week of actions as IMF and World Bank have their annual meetings, and we have been raising our voices from 13 this month, October, and it's going through to 18. That will be actually tomorrow, but we don't stop here. We continue next week, and we should keep raising our voices to the Second World Social Summit, to COP30 and the G20, and this should continue until we have our power. And let's continue claiming, our power on the debts, on climate, on the trade and tax, and the universal social protection, and everything for our local communities. So, colleagues, moving forward now, allow me to welcome Madam Aminata Barry, who is a GCAP co-chair. She's from Mali. Madam Aminata, you have 5 minutes for an opening remarks. Thanks. The floor is yours. Minata, I can't hear you. Madam Aminata, I can't hear you.
Maybe.
Madam Aminata, the floor is yours. Please unmute and go ahead for the opening remarks. Aminata, can you confirm if you can hear me? Colleagues, can you confirm if you can hear Aminata? No.
Sorry, we seem to be unable to hear Madam Aminata, so probably you can
Madam
say...
Aminata, if you can hear us, please, yes, please unmute and go ahead, madam. We can see you, but we can't hear you.
She is muted.
Madam Aminata,
probably...
we cannot hear you. So I see Aminata has issues. So I see her unmuted, but I can't hear her. So colleagues, allow me to continue with the following section, and then Aminata will come up after the fireside dialogue. Aminata, if you are ready, we are moving to the next section, and then I will allow you to share your remarks after the dialogue. So, colleagues, moving forward, as we know, there was the financing, the fourth conference for financing for the development, which was held in May, and we have colleagues who have participated in the conference, and most of us, we know the outcome, and we know also the second World Social Summit is coming and other global processes. Now, allow me to welcome our colleagues who will share their insights on about us as Africa, what is the moment for justice. And here we have the pleasure of having Oluse Babatunde Oyabisi, who's worked with the Nigeria NGO network, but also we have Weska Kopan, who's worked with Aphrodite, and Madam Memory Kachamba from Feminet, and Philip Kalonzo also, who will share about his reflection from the Second African Climate Summit. So, dear speakers, we have 5 to 8 minutes. Please observe your time. Now, as we're moving to the fireside dialogue, it's a pleasure. Let's start with IRPC of welcoming you, sir. We want to hear your reflection, especially as a civil society organization, and what are the civil society action, and maybe connecting it to community development and SCDG. And we know from the FFD4 conference outcomes, of course, we didn't get what we expected, but how are we going to leverage it as we are moving forward with other global processes? And you were very active in the FFD4 conference, and we would love to hear your reflection from the perspective of civil society organization. Sir Oyabisi, the floor viewers, please unmute, and we would love to hear from you. Thanks.
Thanks, Nuru. Thanks, Nuru. Aminata is here, so I would
ask that we listen to Aminata before I then
Ouais,
speak.
j'ai dit, est-ce que
Aminata is able to speak now. So over to you,
vous
Aminata.
pouvez... On
Aminata,
m'entend?
can you hear me now?
D'accord, merci. Donc, on s'excuse pour les mauvaises
Over to you,
connexions.
Aminata.
Et
Okay, thanks.
nous sommes encore là pour l'Assemblée des peuples d'Afrique. Et je suis très content et très honoré d'être avec tout le monde, qu'on se retrouve. Et en Afrique, vous savez, la pauvreté, ce n'est pas une fatalité. C'est le résultat des choix politiques. Ce sont des politiques qui nous imposent des politiques d'austérité dont les résultats sont vraiment ce que nous vivons. Et des vendeurs des marchés qui partagent un maigre revenu entre la scolarité et la nourriture, aux pasteurs qui déplacent les troupeaux après la sécheresse jusqu'aux pêcheurs qui voient la mer gagner sur leur maison. Nos communautés sont prises au croisement de la détresse, de la dette et des changements climatiques. Donc, les hôpitaux manquent de médicaments, les classes d'enseignement et les inondations s'effacent d'année en année. Et donc, nous sommes en face des catastrophes qu'on peut dire naturelles, mais qui ne sont pas naturelles parce qu'on peut les éviter. Et donc, cette assemblée des peuples est l'endroit où la douleur devient possibilité, où le témoignage devient pouvoir. Nous nous réunissons pendant la semaine d'action et en cette journée internationale pour l'élimination de la pauvreté, pour porter notre campagne pour la justice économique et climatique, déplacer les ressources de la dette vers les personnes, passer des promesses à la mise en œuvre des actions concrètes. Il y a eu trop de promesses depuis des dizaines et des dizaines d'années. Donc, 3 repères pour notre échange. La justice de la dette redonne la dignité. Aucun pays ne peut financer les enseignants, les infirmiers, l'accès à l'eau potable en restant enchaîné par des remboursements de dettes. Des remboursements qui sont insoutenables. Nous appelons à des allègements, des restructurations de la dette rapides et transparentes. Nous ne cherchons pas qu'on nous donne l'aumône, mais nous cherchons quand même qu'il y ait des accords justes, qu'il y ait des prêts justes et qu'il y ait des accords sur le climat et les sociaux avec contrôle communautaire pour tracer chaque franc. Donc, il faut que la communauté puisse faire le suivi de tout ce qui se passe. Qu'il y ait une redevabilité aussi de nos gouvernements, aussi bien des emprunteurs comme la Banque mondiale et le Fonds monétaire. Donc, le financement climatique doit soigner, pas blesser. L'adoption et les pertes, préjudices doivent être financés par des dons, par de nouveaux prêts que les fonds aient aux solutions locales et centrées vers les femmes. Je me réjouis de la diversité de nos intervenants aujourd'hui. Femenet, PACJA, Afrodod et d'autres qui sont dans la lutte depuis combien d'années et avec qui nous continuons à faire cette lutte. La protection sociale universelle est notre plancher. Donc, la sécurité de nos revenus, la santé, les questions de plancher de protection sociale sont la manière la plus simple de protéger les familles face aux chocs financés par la fiscalité équitable et la lutte contre les flux financiers illicites. Ce que nous ferons aujourd'hui, c'est écouter attentivement les agriculteurs, les travailleurs de l'informel, les personnes en situation de handicap, les jeunes, les défenseurs de l'environnement, relier les points pour transformer l'expérience vécue en message clair pour le sommet social mondial, la COP 30, le G20 faisons écho. Donc, annuler ou restructurer la dette insoutenable et protéger les dépenses sociales. Délivrer maintenant un financement climatique sous forme de dons aux communautés. Adopter des planchers de protection sociale pour chaque pays africain. Donc, ma demande chaleureuse à chacun, à chacune, venez avec vos meilleures idées et vos meilleurs esprits. Ayons une discussion fructueuse et de délibération sincère. Et d'ici la fin, convenons de messages forts et partageables, ainsi que d'une feuille de route simple indiquant qui fait quoi avant quoi. Avant Berlin aussi au niveau de la COP 30 et Johannesburg avec le G20. Donc, éradiquer la pauvreté, c'est l'amour en politique publique. Je souhaite une rencontre riche et construite. Merci à tout le monde. Merci à tous les partenaires qui nous ont soutenus techniquement, financièrement. Et bonne journée. Et bonne journée à tout le monde. Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam Aminata, especially reminding us we really need to make our voices strong. And the colleagues now let us scale particularity from the opening remarks from Madam Aminata to the next segment, which is a fireside dialogue. And we get a hand of hearing our 4 colleagues in different thematic areas from the CSEO perspective, but from Aphrodite, who deals with debt justice and the fair global finances. But also we have the feminist perspective from Feminist and Pakja. Colleagues, now allow me again to welcome Oyabisi Babatunde from Nigeria to share his insights from the FFD4, but also from the civil society action to community development and sustainable development. Thanks, Oyabisi, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much, Nuru. And 2025 is an especially important year. From the United Nations becoming 80 years to the World Social Summit, to FFD4, to G20, to COP30. So 2025 is for me a multilateral year, for a lack of, better word. But, we must not waste this year. And we can only survive in not wasting this year when we focus on the results that we would like to see. A rapid, integrated, and sustainable global process that is able to help us get some level of convergence needed for social stability, needed for financing of all of the goals, including conversations around climate change. And I do think that for the next processes that we have, which would be World Social Summit happening in the next couple of days, and COP30 also happening in few days and weeks. The focus must be on how we can link the Seville outcomes, comprimos de Seville, with debt resilience and climate change. Though we do not, as Nuru already mentioned, we do not have all of the things we would like to see in FFD4 outcomes. But I do think that when we focus the conversation on debt resilience, in terms of COP30, then we would be doing the right thing. Also linking that to social protection conversations and how the FFD4 is also thinking through that within the context of global tax architecture and global tax cooperation. Also, it's important that we do not miss the mark. I think for me, 3 key themes would be very much important: debt relief, taxation, and social protection. And these are issues that help in being able to lift the many millions that we need to lift out of poverty. But maybe extending that is also how we now need to focus on trade policies, given the fact that trade is now a tool within multilateralism and also within the governance of the global architecture, either around development or finance. How do we as civil society pay attention to conversations on trade, and how that our analysis, critical analysis, not just regurgitating, can help us in focusing around diplomacy and trade, but more importantly, looking at the right infringing elements within trade and how that may exacerbate unemployment or how it may deepen inequality, either across countries or within jurisdictions themselves. I am also particularly going to ask that we focus on FFD4 and how it can help galvanize conversations around climate investment. So we need to understand what the outcomes from FFD4 looks like and what they mean to some of the recommendations that we would like to see either at the World Social Summit or at COP30. Again, the FFD4 has a kind of language that helps in looking at how we also prevent public financial flows to fossil fuel, trying to marry as many of those outcomes that we have seen in FFD4, and how those can help us galvanize either conversations at the World Social Summit or at COP30. I do think how we advocate must also now change as civil society. We must prioritize government engagement if we would want to see policy shifts. But in prioritizing that, we must find a balance between collaboration and constructive friction. WSIS would typically be an arena where if anything we saw at FFD4 is going to be a pointer, then the space for civil society engagement and participation might be a bit limited. However, we must find ways of using quiet diplomacy to begin to tease out the type of results that we would like to see on the ground. And that when all of these processes all over, from the 80 years of the UN to the World Social Summit to the FFD and also to COP30 and G20, we bring together all the documents to see areas of convergence and areas where we can point our leaders to for quick implementation. But more importantly, also see areas that would require improvement, and that we start engaging on those now before the next some processes happen. So this is not a time for us to attend the summit and come back, then go and relax. It's a time for deepened engagement. It will require a lot of expertise on our part, but we must do the work and also work as civil society if we're going to see any result. So my call this morning, this afternoon, this evening, from wherever you're listening, is that the time for regurgitating and just coming to say ABC is bad, XYZ is good is gone. We must roll up our sleeves and get to work. But the three main themes that must guide the next two processes that we have, including the G20, should be debt relief, taxation, and social protection. Over to you, Noor.
Thank you so much, sir, and thanks for reminding us that actually, yes, 2025 it's a battle year for sustainable debt, for social stability, but also for financial justice, and thanks also for sharing a reflection from the FFD4 conference, especially the Compromiso de Seville, the outcome document, and reminding that as our role as civil society organization, taking this very serious and taking action to engage more and to demand for the justice. So colleagues, moving forward now, may I welcome Madam Memory Kachambwa, who is an executive director from Feminet. Madam Kachambwa, Madam Memory, the floor is yours, and I would love to hear your insights as you are working with a feminist organization. Would love to hear your reflection and insight, especially on agenda on women and young girls. And as with also the economic and climate justice campaign, how women are affected, and we as women and young girls and civil society organizations, including men also, how are we leading this at a local level? Madam Memory, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nuru, and thank you so much to our speakers, our keynote speaker, Philip, and our brother from Nigeria. So I think the reflections, I won't go much into it, but I think much has been mentioned from the Financing for Development meeting that we had this year in Seville, the Africa Climate Summit. I think what has been at the center is the need for climate finance that is gender responsive, gender transformative, but finance that actually reaches the communities that are at the front line of the climate crisis. So, we are not seeing this movement despite the call that we are making. In fact, I think what we are seeing more and more is that even coming out from COP29 last year, is the increase in finance, which is almost very much linked to the debt crisis. So I think as we go on with this campaign, we need to ensure that it's just not a campaign for finance to come to Africa in particular, because we know Africa is the most affected, yet it is the continent with the least emissions, which is causing this climate change. And the most important, when you also look at it, it's mostly women who are impacted and who are also affected. So I think our messages need to continue being very clear and very strong in that as well. When we look today, we have an estimated 40 billion. Women spend a lot of time in an estimated 40 billion a year collecting water, doing what we call unpaid care work, which is not yet recognized universally as a contribution to the economy. So I think it is important, as we are also pushing for economic justice, to recognize that care work is work and that it needs to be remunerated as well. And where there is a climate crisis, if there's a climate catastrophe, we know that it is women who actually bear that burden in terms of caring for the communities and ensuring that if there's any recuperation, it's the women who are always at the forefront. Yet they are invisible, yet they're ignored by policy, and they are also undervalued as well. We also need to push to have more women in leadership. And when we talk of women in leadership, it is important for them to be at the decision-making table, to be able to bring in the perspectives that is usually not seen, and usually to ensure that policies are not gender blind in that sense. I think also we are at a time where it's also important for us, like Philip was talking about this week, where we are looking at the International Day of Rural Women. And I see Pauline from the Rural Women's Network in Kenya also on this call, food security. And it is women who actually are still the custodians of holding the ecosystem as well. So when you talk about ending poverty, eradicating poverty, we cannot do that without looking at ending the inequalities and also dismantling some of the negative patriarchal powers that we see. We have seen that there has been a defunding of work that supports eradicating poverty at the rural level, also urban poverty as well. And most of that defunding there's been a shift of funding to militarization. So it is important to say we need to ensure that the funds that are being moved and being prioritized for militarizations are funds that can actually help in eradicating poverty, in creating peaceful communities, but also that will also sustain life through ensuring that there is climate justice. So I think maybe just to end, one of the things that we as Femnet have been pushing is a feminist just transition. And we had a forum during the Africa Climate Summit, which was recognizing Africa's energy and economic transition to be just as well as to be inclusive. So together with a lot of partners, we presented a call for a just feminist transition, which will be locally led and also not just looking at some of the imposed blueprints that we see. We've also been doing what we call the Africa Feminist Academy on Climate Justice, and of course, also supporting this with the summer school under the Africa Activists for Climate Justice, which is convened by our partners, PADJA. So the Africa Feminist Academy on Climate Justice has been bringing together grassroots, environmental defenders, human rights activists, the media, as well as policy advocates to build knowledge, as well as to start shifting the narratives that we hear on which sort of like putting women as powerless, but actually shifting the narratives to say, as women, as African women, in all our diversity, we have the power, we have the voice to actually move the needle and to make sure that there's systematic change and structural change in this whole economic system that is very unjust. So I'll just end by maybe just saying some of the key messages and call for action in this, also commemorating this day of eradicating poverty, is that it's important to reclaim power and also shift from dependence to self-determination, shifting from extraction to regeneration, from silence to feminist resistance, and to also build African economies that value care, that are based on the principles of Ubuntu, that protect the biodiversity, and that they center women's labor, women's unpaid care work, and there's leadership as well as knowledge. Indigenous knowledge is also recognized. And I think together it is important, Amina Mama, a feminist scholar, always says we are not powerless, but we have power because of we are together. So I think I'll end by just saying that climate justice and economic justice are important for us to move forward, but they should also center gender justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Memory, for sharing your perspective from the feminist organization. And I can't agree more that we really needed to move, to shift from silent to feminist resilience, and that this cannot be achieved if women are not left. And you are very strong reflection from the COP29 going to the FFD4 conference, but your good initiatives from the second African Climate Summit, which was in Addis a few months ago. And for as the next session will be on a general discussion of our key demands. Madam Memory has reminding us to have a very clear message demanding justice for women, connecting to all the injustices women and girls in Africa have been suffering from. Now, colleagues, allow me to welcome Riska from Afrodad. Riska, if you can hear me, please confirm. Riska, are you here? If not yet, I will go back to Philip Kilonzo. And Philip, my sincere apologies for misspelling your name earlier. So, Philip, I want you to, we were very active, APACJA with many organization who has joined today. I was very active in the the second African Climate Summit a few months ago. And I know we have engaged the non-state actors process. I know COP30 is also approaching. Philip, I would love to hear from you of what do you think will be the action which community should take this month, from the road to the African Climate Summit to the COP30. And I know from your opening reflection earlier, you reminded us to shift from declaration to people's power. Philip, the floor is yours. Thanks.
No, I would have, let me be honest, I would have first loved to hear from Riska. It's long since I heard from her. So I would have really been quite at an advantage point, just in case she's available, and then I can now proceed. But in absence, I can go on. Please let me know.
Thanks. Riska, can you confirm if you are already set? Philip, from Riska, she was setting something. If she's not, Riska, can you confirm?
Okay, let me.
Please proceed. Riska will come after you. Thanks.
Yeah, let me save a bit of a strain, and I can come in as Riska tries to organize. And I think Memory has started to provide some insights around what I'm going to say, but I'll begin with some few disclaimers. I really want to provide a bit of highlights of useful hooks for advancing our campaign as captured within the declaration of the Second African Climate Summit. Of course, PACHA having led quite an elaborate multi-stakeholder process, but also engaged in curating and convening other high-level mandated events, as it was a decision of our government of Ethiopia and the African Union Commission, but also the entire process being important to us. So the first disclaimer is that the draft that the declaration that I'm making reference to is still on draft. And therefore, it's important for us to really note that from the onset. Secondly, that the declaration that I'm also making reference to, being still in a draft form, there are also other counteracting and competing forces that those in leadership are likely again to stick to the aspirations of the first African Climate Summit declaration in Nairobi. And again, its aspirations were quite capitalistic oriented. The Second African Climate Summit declaration is quite reform oriented. And having said that, again, let me also say that what the declaration has done is to give us quite broad roadmap around where the reforms need to happen, and also began to detail a bit of the nature of reforms that are necessary, not only to drive climate action within the continent in a much more transformative manner, but to realize the kind of results that we want to see. And right from the onset, the government of Ethiopia, together with the African Union Commission, were quite clear that the Second African Climate Summit should not only center African leadership, but also African leadership in terms of curating solutions. And thirdly, which is more important, and driving global reforms that are necessary in advancing the climate justice agenda. The first reform that is very important and that is well anchored within the current draft of the African Climate Summit is around reforming the global financial architecture, dealing with the financing question, dealing with the debt question, and dealing with the aid question. I think that reform agenda is extremely anchored within that particular process. But also, again, within that reform aspiration is reforming the multilateral development banks, again, to deliver climate finance that is fairer, cheaper, and accessible to Africa. Those who recall very well, we achieved a new collective quantified goal in Baku that send us multilateral development banks in delivery of climate finance. And therefore, it's important that the Second African Climate Summit and its declaration began to pronounce itself to the nature of reforms that needs to happen in the multilateral development banks to enable them deliver that climate finance that resonates with our aspirations. But more importantly is then mobilizing climate finance as part of the broad reform. And within the declaration itself, it's clear that Africa is demanding over $3 trillion by 2030 for climate action goal. And this, again, it's also quite clear within the declaration that it must be delivered in terms of grants, not loans, so as to avoid worsening debt crisis. So the declaration itself is actually very clear in terms of not only the quantum of resources that is needed to drive climate action by 2030, but also the nature of the funds themselves, being grants, and again, ensuring that it doesn't worsen climate impact, which is very important. The operationalization of losses and loss and damage, the operationalization of the fund for responding to loss and damage is also clearly articulated there. And within it, again, it emphasizes very direct and simplified access modalities for vulnerable countries and communities. But then again, a clear window to be established for funding slow onset events, such as climate-induced mobility. Within it, again, that again connects with the strive to ensure that we are able not only to increase the funding for disaster risk reduction, but also ensuring that it is also responsive to issues that are relevant to our context. But then the declaration clearly states that in terms of adaptation and resilience building, it states that the priority for Africa is adaptation. So it has no contestation on where the priority is. And it is also clear in terms of the sectors that need to be supported foremost to respond to climate change: the water, the food sector, the fragile ecosystems, but also infrastructure. So it's quite clear in terms of the sectors that need to be supported and strengthened in this particular regard. And of course, given priority within the national adaptation plans, again, we sort of integrated development strategies. And when we talk about integrated development strategies, also in the context of mobilization of resources, both from domestic sources and international sources. The attention that is given to agriculture, again, is also something that we need to note, which again is an emphasis around full implementation of the Kampala-Kandeb Declaration. And again, within it, emphasis again being placed on direct grant-based support to small orders, strengthening the digital agriculture and resilient agriculture, and also knowledge sharing platforms. So we need to ask, particularly when you bring digital agriculture and when you bring knowledge sharing platforms, what is the nature of these platforms? Who is in control of these platforms? And what is the African agenda within? How do we systematically advance the African agenda within those particular platforms, which is important? Significantly, I think the first Africa Climate Summit declaration did not have a component around health, but this one again recognized climate change impact on health and began to look at climate resilient health systems. And the key question is, when we talk about climate resilient health systems, are we talking about the health infrastructure within the ministries of health as largely likely to be defined? Or are we looking at the broad ecosystems of health, looking at the natural ecosystems, the human ecosystems, but also the health infrastructure in the spirit of one health approach as it is defined within the context of Africa, which is important. And we need to look at this as we move to the next level. I think I need to emphasize that the nature-based solution and with initiatives such as the Great Green Wall Initiative, the Afri 100, the Ethiopian Green Legacy programs are some of the, again, programs that have been emphasized to drive the land restoration. And when you come to the land restoration, then we need to ask, how did we degrade our land initially? And you realize again, it's a failure to harmonize foreign-oriented production models with the traditional models that would have actually ensured that there is continuing resilience. And therefore, the integration of the indigenous knowledge and the local stewardship is given quite an emphasis in community-led conservancy approaches within the declaration itself. How is it going to happen, particularly when we talk about a conservancy sector in Africa that is foreign controlled, is something that we need to look into. In terms of the energy access and transition, the declaration is bold in terms of committing to deliver universal energy access to 300 million people and clean cooking solutions for 900 million people. Clean cooking, energy access, I'm looking at it in context of women, I'm looking at it in context of agriculture and the role that is meant to play in terms of making agriculture resilient. But even as we talk about increasing the Africa's share of global renewable energy financing from 2% to at least 20%, the key question that we need to ask ourselves is whether, again, this increase will be driving us further into energy colonization, or we have an opportunity for Africans themselves to emerge as entrepreneurs and investors in the energy sector, in the spirit of decolonizing the energy sector, in the spirit of ensuring that Africans are able to have a pie and a share around the energy sector, which is important in this particular case. So it's important, again, to look at the spirit, the aspiration, and the commitments, and begin to see how do we balance Africa interests within that particular process. In terms of the just transition, of course, beyond securing the resources that are needed for just transition within the continent, and ensuring that, again, our critical minerals drive sustainable development and poverty eradication goals, the declaration is also very bold in terms of rejecting punitive unilateral measures such as the EU border carbon adjustment mechanisms. And this is something that we need to be cautious about in terms of how we work around that. Remember, in terms of climate finance, there is something that I did not mention. The declaration, again, is also bold in terms of how it looks at our engagements in that particular sphere and in that particular regard. My power is going down. I'll be requesting somebody to help me, but as I continue. Now, allow me just 1 minute to ask for assistance, just 1 minute. So sorry for that. In terms of technology and innovation, of course, yeah, there was the launch of the African Climate Innovation Compact. And when it comes to technology and the Africa Climate Facility, which again is meant to mobilize around 50 billions annually for innovation. The key question that I raise at this particular point is to ask if this innovation will be foreign in character, or this innovation again will be controlled by Africa, and what is the space for Africa in terms of driving the innovation, the innovations around technology. I think the overarching emphasis around unity of Africa in global negotiations, particularly as we now face the G20 and as we face the COP30, became quite important. But what we probably need to note is as late as up to last week, but one, there were two countries, there were two parties, not countries, there were two parties that had not submitted their official position to G20. One of those parties is actually the African Union, which had not really sent which had not actually sent the official position of Africa to G20 process. So the key question to ask is, what will be the nature of that position? And we're asking the nature, given the fact that now US, and particularly Trump, will now be in South Africa. He has changed his mind. He will be in South Africa for G20. Initially, he had said he will not be there. Now he will be there, but he doesn't want to hear anything to do with climate change. What will be the position? Will be the position mediated to accommodate a US position, or Africa, will it look at its entry as quite a maiden entry and begin to see how it works into that space to create sufficient disruption. I think these are things that we need to be cognizant about, even as we speak about all these elements that we are talking about. But remember the contradiction. US is quite keen to support the resilience agenda. I'm not too sure what is resilience without adaptation and without cutting on emission and without climate action. So these are the contradictions that we are faced with, which we need to note. But it's not all cozy. Yes, I've actually talked about the Second African Climate Summit being quite reform-oriented in terms of the global financial architecture, the debt issues, the access to finance, the private resource mobilization, in terms of establishing global carbon trading regimes with clear pipelines, well-structured mechanisms and pipelines for resources from such carbon endeavor to flow to Africa. Those are bold aspirations, but it's not like it doesn't have its own substantial weaknesses. There are substantial weaknesses therein. Those who followed the process of developing of the declaration clearly understand the agitation by member states to ensure that the declaration is not committal on member states. And that means the aspiration of the declaration then must be pushed down the throats of member states, again, to customize that aspiration, which is important in our pursuit. And this is the role that the non-state actors, the civil society, the non-state actors need to do quite in a bold manner, because in absence of that bold effort, then that will be a challenge. Within the declaration itself, you see a bit of recommendation of shifting from aid to investments. And I'm inviting all of you to think through the ramification of that board pronouncement that we want to move from aid to shift from aid to investments. What does it mean in terms of delivering on global commitments that are premised on aid, that are premised on other multilateral frameworks, including the Paris Agreement, when you look at it in the spirit of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities? What does it mean in this particular context? Because it's, again, a bold shift within the SES declaration. When we speak about the gold standards in carbon investments, I think our big challenge is to ask whether we are in control of the carbon market. And if we are not in control of the carbon market, how does our gold standards really apply in such a context, which is important to look at it. But then overall, within the African Climate Summit, the power of Africa, again, to lead a Pan-African level effort in advancing Africa's global diplomacy was emphasized. What we are not too sure is whether it has power, sufficient powers, really to engage at that particular level. And then finally, I want to really look again at the levels of governance in terms of implementation of this declaration. How do you structure the levels of governance to ensure that there is effective implementation of the aspirations of the declaration? Because the bulk of the implementation is to occur at country level. And again, unless the spirit of the declaration is anchored within national level action plans, then a number of things, again, will fall through the cracks. So I just felt like it's important to sort of highlight where we have lapses and where we need to continue agitation and action. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Philip. That was very insightful and comprehensive for taking us through from the COP29 to the Second African Climate Summit in Addis, but also the road to the COP30, and for highlighting our role as non-state actors from decolonizing the energy sector to African power, shifting from declaration to realities, but also shifting from aid to investment and so many more. And thank you all. Take this time to thank all of our speakers earlier. Now, allow me to welcome Riska. Riska, if you are ready, or if there is anybody from Aphrodite who is set to talk about debt justice, please unmute and take the floor. is there any representative from AfroDad to take us through the debt justice? If not, because of time, colleagues, allow me to proceed to the next section, which actually it is for the people's power. And please give a thumb up to all of our speakers. I think from Oyabisi to Madam Kachamba to Philip, have been hearing the threads on debt justice, grantee-based climate finance, adaptation, loss and damage, social protection, civic space, feminist resilience, and so more. But most important, Africa taking power. So colleagues, now we are moving to the people's power section, which is hearing voices from the ground. And in this section, now it's a heartbeat of our today's session, as we call this the People's Assembly. But let us remind ourselves that also it is also an International Day for Eradication of Poverty. And I would love to hear from you all. It is an open floor, an open plenary. Please raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak. And before we proceed, colleagues, allow me to share. We have 2 questions set. Allow me to share my screen of the 2 questions which we want you to as you are contributing, to want you to refer and reflect on these 2 questions. Help all of us, we can see the first question is who holds the key? Who holds the key to ending poverty and the inequalities, as we have been hearing from the climate finances, economic finances, and the forms of the global financial architecture, and so more. Let's think who holds the key to ending poverty and the inequalities. But secondly, what our core message and a demand to those actors, those who hold the key. And thirdly, what are our mobilization strategies, our approaches, and their priorities attached to the key moments as we are moving to the Second World Social Summit, the COP30 and the G20, all of them being in the next month, which is November. So colleagues, I would love to see your hands up. Please raise your hands for the discussion. Yes. Please, I need to see your hands up to share of the key demands. Now, may I take this pleasure to welcome Sumba. Sumba, if you can hear me, please unmute and take the floor. Thanks.
Thank you so much. You can hear me, right?
Sumba, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Sumba is not ready. I saw a hand from somebody, Mwajuma.
Sumba is talking.
Colleagues,
hello.
If you're ready to share your contribution, please unmute and take the floor.
Yes, I am ready.
2 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope you can hear me. My name is Suma and I'm joining you from Kibra, Nairobi. And mine is to just give a brief understanding of the voices from the ground, the lived realities from the ground. So Kibra being one of the most vibrant yet economically challenged communities in Kenya. Today I don't speak as an expert,
colleagues,
but
it's an open floor, and this is for everybody. Would love to hear voices from the ground. Yes, Sylvia, please go ahead.
Suba was speaking before you interjected.
Okay.
We can hear, and we can hear her.
Oh, you can hear me. Thank you. So when we talk about debt and economic justice, the conversation often sounds technical, sounds of numbers, graphs, government policies, but at the ground level, debt is young mothers in informal settlements like Kibra giving birth at home because the local clinics have no supplies or because the health workers are on strike. Like in Kenya, I think the health workers have been on strike for months now. And in Kibra is fathers and mothers making less than 200 shillings per day, which is basically less than $2, which is not enough for food or rent or school fees. So these are not statistics. These are stories, and they're human. They're the human cost of an economy trapped in debt. Kenya now spends around 60% of its revenue just servicing debt. That means less money for hospitals, schools, and almost nothing for social protection. So when we say our people are poor, it is not because they're lazy or unwilling. It's because the government is forced to choose between paying international creditors or protecting its citizens. And too often we all know which one gets chosen. So now imagine facing poverty and then losing everything again because of climate change. For instance, in Kibra, I have seen families' homes washed away by floods that come without warning. One night you have a roof, the next morning the little you had is gone and you're standing in water. In rural Kenya, I've met farmers who can no longer predict the rains. Their maize dry. And yet the money that is supposed to help us adapt, the so-called climate finance, often comes as loans. So we are borrowing money to survive a crisis that we did not create. And we all know Africa contributes the least to climate injustices or to climate crisis. And that is not climate aid. The climate finance that comes as loans is not climate aid. It's climate injustice disguised as help. So let's be honest, poverty and climate change, they wear a woman's face. When hospitals are underfunded, it's women who care for the sick at home. When food is scarce, it's mothers who skip meals so their children can eat. When schools are too expensive, it is girls, mostly in informal settlements, who stay home first. In our communities, we have discussions where people say they had to sleep with someone because they were hungry, not because they wanted to. And that is a sad reality. That is what economic injustice looks like when it collides with gender inequality. It's not just about money, it's about dignity, safety, and choice. So when we talk about eradicating poverty, we must understand that it's not gender neutral. Women carry the heaviest burdens, and yet they are also the backbone of community resilience. But even in all this pain, in our lived realities, because our communities, especially women and youth, have refused to give up, women in Kibra have formed savings groups. They contribute around 50 shillings. They call them chama each week, to just support one another, pay school fees, hospital bills for women who've given birth and they're stuck in hospitals, and even to start small businesses. In counties like Kisumu, we have young people who are running community recycling initiative, turning waste into income, fighting pollution, and protecting the environment at the same time. And across Kenya, youth-led groups like ours are using social media to connect local struggles to global injustices, which is linking debt, gender inequality, and the climate crisis into one powerful message, which is our poverty is not accidental, it is political. When I hear about the IMF, the World Bank, or the G20, I think about how their decisions ripple down to our neighborhoods. Because when the IMF tells Kenya to cut spending, it means another health clinic without medicine. When global leaders talk about climate finance, but send it as loans, it means our children will grow up paying debts for today's disasters. And when around 88 billion US dollars leaves Africa every year through tax evasion and illicit cash flows, it means we are robbed. And not by thieves in the night, but by systems designed to keep us poor. And that's why this People's Assembly is so powerful, because it's a space where voices from the ground, voices like mine, can speak truth to power. We remind the world that solutions must be people-centered and not profit-driven. So my call would be, even as we look ahead to WSS2, World Social Summit 2 or COP30 and the G20, we demand, we have, here my demands, and not as charity, but as justice. I demand that we cancel Africa's illegitimate debt. Our people cannot breathe under the weight of debts already repaid in suffering. I demand that we make climate finance grant-based, not loan-based. Don't make us pay to survive disasters we did not create. Support illicit financial flows and demand fair taxation. Multinational corporations must stop stealing Africa's future. Invest in universal social protection. No one should fall into poverty because they got sick or lost a job or faced a flood, and put women and youth at the heart of decision making, not just as participants, but as power holders. So despite everything, I believe in hope. I've seen it in the eyes of the girls who understand their rights, in the mothers who plant vegetables in old containers just to feed their children, in youth who stand in the rain during protests because they refuse to be silenced, youth who lose their lives in protests just because they refuse to be silenced. Hope for us is not just a feeling. It's a form of resistance. It's believing that poverty is not destiny. It's systemic, and that it's a system that can be changed. So as we commemorate the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, let's remember, poverty is not natural. It is the outcome of choices, which are political, financial, and structural. But we, the people, we have the power to make the different choices. We may not sit in the boardrooms of IMF or G20, let's be honest, but through assemblies like this, through solidarity across Africa, we are rewriting the story of our continent, from pain to power, from survival to justice, because when we, the poor, organize, poverty ends. I hope you've heard me. Thank you so much. That was
Thank you
my presentation.
so much. Thank you so much, Sumba, and a big clap and thumb ups for Sumba for sharing, the practical experience from the local communities in Kenya. Also, so much demands for the young girls and the women and general and a vulnerable group. That was powerful and sharing very strong demand across the climate and the economic justice campaign. And most importantly, she echoed on the need of solidarity as Africa to change this. So colleagues, moving forward now, may I welcome Anyedi Inyangi. Please unmute and take the floor. Please keep your presentation short so as we allow all colleagues with their thoughts to share the message and to get to hear from them. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Madam. Please tell us where you connecting us from and your organization, if possible, and please proceed.
Thank you so much. My name is Anyedi Yang. I'm connecting from Akwa Ibom State, Uyo, Niger Delta, that is suffering the worst devastation of oil drilling, mining, and all what have you in Nigeria. I'm speaking from Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. I was fortunate to be at the COP29 and also at the SCS2 last month. And I want to appreciate Pak Ja that is trying to gather the civil society so that they can hear and raise a voice concerning climate action. I want to appreciate this gathering and to also lend a voice. I was also in the women's pavilion. The women did well. The youth pavilion, the youth also raised a voice. But in this particular sense, we've been talking. What is the position of the whole Africa? Because I think it is segmentation that is making our voices lean, that is not making these voices have impact. What is Africa agitating for? Who is leading? I can see the African Union. What are they doing to incorporate all the voices? It is often said, leave no one behind. What are they doing to the youth? How are they carrying the youth to COP30 to be able to talk? How are they carrying the women to COP30 and the World Social Summit? What is the position of the CSOs? How do they get sponsors to get to all these locations to be able to make a unified voices for Africa? The youth are struggling in their respective area. For example, where I come from, I will tell you that not many understand what climate change is even about, because there is not much sensitization. And even the ones that understood or understand this situation, there is no finances to scale it up. They don't have, because individuals are struggling to do it alone. My organization is Anedi Young Foundation, so to say, and I am a researcher, currently a PhD student in the University of Uyo. I got into climate space because I said always political science, they will ask me to write about war, this, that. I am not fighting any war this time around. There is a serious menace in the society, and that is climate change. That I'm going into that, I'm researching on that. And I pleaded with my supervisor, my prof, and he agreed with me. So since I get into the space of climate change, I have seen that voices from the Niger Delta are very lean, very lean. And I got to discover that they don't have support. The CSOs are struggling. The youth are struggling to be heard. The women are struggling to be heard. And not to talk of joining any international conference or regional conference. They cannot even afford. So most times their voices are not heard. So now we are going to COP30. A lot of organizations have gotten accreditation. How are they going? What is the position of Africa? How can Africa come together and come out with a common position to talk about climate change, to talk about climate finance, to talk about just transition, to talk about the youth, the women, the suffering, the devastation that is happening in all the areas in Africa? What voices? How can this be coordinated? And who is going to lead in this coalition? These are my points. Everybody is talking. When everybody talks, it is not, they will only hear, but they won't do anything. But can there be a front? Can there be a forum where Africa will be able to speak at the COP as a unified body? The youth will speak, the women will speak. And then demand for just transition, demand for climate justice, demand for loss and damage, demand for cancellation of debt. And let me tell you, in my state, not only in my state, the federal universities in Nigeria are on strike because of finances, because the university education is nothing to write home about. The lecturers are not having, they are complaining they don't have the equipment and the things that needed to be in the university, not to talk of their salaries. So all this, the health institution. So I am now asking, representing the organization, the youth, the women around this area, how are we going to cope? What are the positions? Too many organizations have come up with. Can it be coordinated and we come out with one policy statement where all sons and daughters of Africa will present as a voice? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam, for sharing your voices from West Africa and Nigeria. I think that's very powerful. And in this session, I think we really need to have with a common position. And the most importantly, for echoing who is leading on what. I think on the way forward, we're discussing who is leading on what as we are preparing for the COP30. We'll be leading on the second World Social Summit in Doha. Who is leading as the non-state actors, as a civil society organization, and as I see here, we have more than 100 organizations. So, colleagues, allow me to welcome the next contributor. Please unmute and take the floor. Thanks.
Every time conference. What are we conference? What is the result? Bring it up. Can you make that thing green?
This one?
African, yeah. It won't be fine.
Maybe
Why?
And
Elizabeth, can you please unmute and take the floor? Please remember to be brief. Thank you. Elizabeth, please go ahead.
I am here. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, everyone. My name is Elizabeth J.O. I'm from Nigeria. I'm the founder, Gender and Environmental Risk Reduction Initiative. We're based in Benue State, North Central Nigeria. I want to commend you for putting together this webinar, this dialogue to commemorate International Day of Poverty, ending poverty. There is a whole lot for us to talk about, but I want to narrow my submission, my observations, and my key interventions to just one issue. Talking of poverty, we know that globally, women are the face of poverty. Poverty is, there is a whole lot around feminization of poverty. And the issues, why it's like that is clear. Women are the ones that have been systematically discriminated against. For us in Africa, as a result of social norms, women, you find them always on the other side. Let me borrow from the countries of the West to say on the left side. So when you talk of the first to be educated and all of that, yes, we've come up, we've gone a long way in terms of education, where of the plague that has hit our continent. And I'm talking about the conflict situation where most of us in West Africa, especially Nigeria and other sister West African countries, have been battling issues of conflicts. This revolves around resources. And because it's around resources, women are suffering a double jeopardy. They are the worst hit in terms of when the conflicts, they are the ones that are most affected, displacements, migration, they rarely migrate. They move into just nearby host communities. They can't migrate to go to look the way they may migrate. They take up multiple roles and all of that. So usually also in peace talks, women, peace and security, women are marginalized, their voices are rarely heard. There have been battles struggling to keep women there. But it's not the same. I am from Benue State, like I said. Google Benue State and conflicts, we see what is happening here regarding farmer header crisis. It's been a whole lot for years, over a decade now. Indigenous communities are disrupted. So half of the population are disrupted for indigenous homes because of the conflict. A lot of them living in IDP camps and in host communities. And so whenever you visit the IDPs, it is women there. In the host communities, it is women and children. So I agree with my sister around the observations of what is happening, strategic interventions, concretely, those that are committed to. We are committing to at all of the levels of conversations, international and regional, to end poverty. We need to move from rhetorics of reechoing our voices and our submissions and our cries. are lamentations. We've lamented enough. We want to need concrete evidences. All of this revolves around issues of financing, just transition. Everybody move transition, move this one, that one. Agriculture is undergoing transformation. We've been saying, okay, look, we need to localize, let it be within our context. This is where we are. Everything must take into our cognizance, our context of inadequate information, inadequate access to technology, everything. So for those that will be going to COP, for the twice I have been there, it used to be, I did it out of personal efforts. I can't go now, but I've registered online, and I'm hoping to engage as much as possible, working with national organizations, for instance, WEP, that is already going to be there. And for my sister in Nigeria, let's connect. There are a whole lot of informations and platforms you will leverage on to begin to make your submissions there as well, so that they will be taken. The women gender consistency, there is even the youth consistency and even the children consistency. Let's link up after here so that I can share what I know, how to network around this with you. But then what I'm saying is, we were in Abuja, for instance. We have a former executive director of UN Women. She's from South Africa, the former vice president of South Africa. She made submissions, and the whole of this, then we discussed, and she mentioned the G20 meeting. How many of us in Nigeria, or even national organizations, or within Africa, women-led organizations, we are doing a lot. Every day now, people are knocking on our doors because we're in a conflict situation, almost like a war. Women coming with children at their back, asking for support, feeding to hospital. I know the number of times I have rescued people, taking young girls to the camp, and all of that, because we work also. Part of our work, we're having an ongoing it's small intervention supported by U.S. Embassy in the camp. The stories are not good. The picture is not good. For those that are going, and from here, whatever is to be taken, we need moving from rhetoric to action. How can we move forward? It revolves around resource mobilization. Smaller organizations that are taking it all. Usually, I do consultancies. By the grace of God, I work, I lecture, and then I'm doing this work. Everything I earn is shared. And as a single parent, is shared between supporting the organization, supporting community, supporting everyone, family. The burden is too much. And so both issues of smaller organizations, women organizations, we are the closer to the grassroots to work with them. We are the closer to government even to amplify. But then we are suffering, no finances, no more opportunities to network and gain meaningful are not there. And so it's struggle, struggle, struggle. We cannot continue like this. For those that will be there, ensure our voice are amplified. Let everything about climate change, climate justice, yes, let it be lost. So thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to share.
Elizabeth, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for echoing on demands for women and from the women group and a feministic group. And thanks for the connection. Colleagues from Nigeria, I think Elizabeth also highlighted you can connect with Iham. Now let's move with Melania. You are the next, and then it will be followed by Sharon, and then Eda. I see so many hands from women. I don't see colleagues. Also, I would love to hear from the other gender. This is not a gender meeting. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Melanie Chura, and I work with an organization called People's Process on Housing and Poverty in Zambia, an affiliate of Slum Dwellers International. And I would just like to add a voice to the conversation. And one of the things that I would like to say is that, yes, indeed, we need action. And looking at Africa, we are well endowed with a lot of resources. So I think one of the things that we need to start looking at is looking within. What can we do as Africans? We have great minds. We can network, we can speak to each other and use our resources to build our own wealth. The financing landscape has changed a lot, and we are being forced now to look within ourselves and see how can we improve our society. We also need to look at issues of corruption within ourselves. Are we doing things with integrity? How can we improve in such areas? And then also looking at breaking down the barriers. and showing the evidence that we're able to do things. And I love to hear from, was it Sumba, who was talking about where women are able to start with their own savings. Our organization does similar work, and where women start with their own savings and demonstrate that you can build housing, you can put in sanitation, but of course we need support from government and other stakeholders. I also would like to make an appeal to the people that are going to COP and are able to go onto these various platforms, that yes, we are making demands, and but we don't see the consequences of the financing not coming. What can we do differently to ensure that even when we make these demands, there are consequences for the people that are causing the problems for the people on the ground? So I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melania, for sharing voices from Zambia. Yes, it's back to us on how are we pushing for the demands, but moving from declaration to action, and actually making sure that these global processes are transformative, and also focusing on African-based solution. Now let's hear from Sharon. Sharon, please tell us where you're coming from and go direct to what are the demands you echo and with these people's assembly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Sharon Kadagaya Gimode. I come from Kenya. I am currently the thematic lead of green transition in the EU Meta framework, as well as the team lead for a consortium, one of the biggest consortium in the North Rift region of Kenya, called the Climate Dialogues and Resilience Consortium. And I have a few things. I'll be very brief about my input. So when we talk about the who holds the key to ending poverty, of course, we know that it's all about co-delivery between and concerted efforts between global actors, continental actors, national actors, and all the way down to community actors. That's
young man, Mary, prepare.
Yes, sorry. That
Colleague,
said,
if you're not, if I haven't allowed you to speak, can you please unmute to allow everybody to hear from our colleagues? Thanks.
Yes, sorry, my apologies for that. So that said, some of the demands that I feel that should be emphasized and key messages is the fact that climate crisis is not just an environmental crisis. Rather, it cuts across finances, social, gender, and the fact that loss and damage funding must be accessible. I think that is something that we need to really put out our voice and have it considered for those who will be attending such forums. And then there's very urgent need to restructure the global finance architecture. For me, I feel like Africa cannot get into transition. Rather, Africa cannot transition if 40% of budgets go into paying debts or debt repayment. That said, I think we need to come together and agitate and demand for debt cancellation for the sake of climate action. Just like that. That is my brief input with regards to what are our demands to these actors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. That was very good, and thanks for echoing on the demand to reform the global financial architecture. I think this has been very powerful from the Africa, and we are happy we had from President Ruto, the previous UNGA, but have had that being also supported by other presidents from Africa, from Namibia, from South Africa, from Tanzania as well, and others. I think we should keep that powerful and keep pushing for the reforms of the global financial architecture. And colleagues, let me remind you also, this is it is an action week, and right now, as we continue with this conversation, IMF and the World Bank are holding their annual meeting. So please take our time to mobilize online, to share these demands through your network, through your platform, to keep pushing for this, because though our leaders are pushing for this, we also need to come up with the key demand and to support their initiatives as non-state actors. Now, let me move to Mohammed. Mohammed, would love to hear from you. The floor is yours. Mohammed, please unmute and continue. Thanks.
Thank you, sister. And my name is Muhammad Yunus Hassan from SESDO, Somali Awareness and Social Development Organization based in Somalia. I would like to add one input about the panel discussion and climate and economic justice. Ending poverty and inequality requires joint action from global financial institutions like IMF, World Bank, G20, regional bodies, and African Union and IGAD, national governments and civil society organizations. These actors control critical levers such as debt restructuring, fair taxation, climate finance, and inclusive development policies. We need them to cancel or restructure unsustainable debts for low-income countries, increase direct investment in community-led development, ensure that climate finance reaches the most vulnerable populations, and monitor fair trade and progressive taxation that reduces inequality. Thank you. Over to you, Dia.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Mohammed, for sharing, advices from the Somaliland. Now, colleagues, I will allow two speakers, and then you can always drop a message in our chat to share your thoughts and the demands on this, and then we go to the next session. Allow me now to welcome Selina for our advices.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nuru, for giving me the time. I just want to say thank you very much to GCAP and FEMNET and also PACTA for this wonderful, wonderful space for us to discuss all these issues. Mine is about accountability. We really need to come up with better systems of holding the global organizations and our governments also accountable for the many promises that they have made, and also the things that have happened to us in the global south, especially in Africa. I would like to thank the sister from Nigeria who brought up the issue of indigenous peoples, just to tell her that it's not only in Nigeria. We here in Kenya, we saw the evictions of the Okiek indigenous peoples from their homeland in the Mau forest. We've seen the Maasai, the Loliondo Maasai of Tanzania also being evicted from their own homeland. And these are things we need to hold our governments accountable for, all these things that they are doing to us. The global organizations, the global governments in Glasgow during COP26 promised about $1.6 billion, if I remember very well, for indigenous peoples in the global south. And up to now, nothing has come. What have we done as civil society to ensure that they honor their commitments? So my demand is accountability, and how do we hold the people that matter accountable for our well-being. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Selina. Eda, you are the last one, and then I will give a single minute to our previous speaker to share their reaction, and then we share the way forward. Eda, the floor is yours.
My name is Happy as well.
Thank you for giving me Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Eda Chebet Kapkea, a youth representative of the Climate Dialogue and Resilience Consortia, also the founder of Hug Asida community-based organization. My contribution to this will be, when we talk of ending poverty and inequality through climate justice, genuine goodwill is what will lead to that. It will lead to us ending the poverty, and it should come from the multiple power holders, and we are not meaning only the global north, also the global south governments, the CSOs, and the communities. We should ensure this that is being introduced to us, this that is being introduced to our communities, really reflects our people's real situations on the ground. And also, if we look, for instance, the climate finance model, carbon markets, they are promising. They are here and they are really going to help us. But to see the impact of this, it will depend genuinely on the goodwill of the implementers. If we want to achieve true climate justice, the implementers and the project developers and the NGOs and the government and us as the CSOs, we should ensure that these programs reflect and benefit and also include the communities that they are meant to support. Thank you for giving me this chance.
Thank you so much, Eda, for also reminding us that this conversation should be people-centered and the solution should be people-centered. So, colleagues, now we only have 4 minutes.
No, my hand is up, Madam Chair. My hand was up earlier.
But then, so maybe I give it just a single minute.
From Southern Africa.
Yes, for a minute, please share key message from South Africa. Just a minute, not more.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and everyone, and our beloved presenters for very prolific presentations. My name is Janet Munakamwe, representing the African Diaspora Workers Network, and the issues of migration are very, very important, particular to the work that we do, bearing in mind that climate change actually trigger displacements and forced migration of peoples. So for me, I have quite a number of issues, but I will just touch on a few since we are running out of time. Thank you for your benevolence. I would really want to agree with the last speaker around the issue of accountability. That's the key issue that I wanted to really raise. As to the key question is, do we even follow up on our declarations, or we only have to come back when it's actually near time to the next COP, gatherings? That's one. I guess it's by time we really also have to demand binding instruments that would actually hold, the power bearers to account. In terms of how do we really ensure that leaders commit, the commitments they make each and every year are realized? Because I guess the issue is about iterations of demands and commitments, but without really holding power to promise. I guess somebody really delved into that earlier on. So from our own side, we do have a role to play, but also in terms of the demands, I guess we really need to look inwards as well, much as we look outwards, out of Africa. We do have high net worth individuals who are actually making huge profits from extractivism, activities on the continent. Those, we should also hold them to account. Otherwise, if we look outbound, everybody will just sit and take advantage that we are actually backing, perhaps knocking on the wrong doors. And then lastly, I really appreciate the presentation by Madam Memory earlier around the need to have as many women in leadership position. But the key question also lies on how many women actually constitute the African team of negotiators. How many women are there on the table as all these commitments taking into account all the issues that my beloved sisters have actually raised that are really gendered. The issues of social, reproductive, unpaid, care work. Who is actually bringing them on the table? And I think there is some sentiment that perhaps the US has a different view around, climate change. But what has happened this year only, we have noted for the first time huge floods that have affected the US and they were caught unawares. And I guess this is the time that our messaging should actually be in the form of bringing together, climate change is real and we need concerted efforts for all of us. Climate change doesn't know skin color, doesn't know gender, doesn't know, you know, all these social markers that we normally, it doesn't know class. So perhaps those are the issues that we need to put on our lobbying table.
Madam.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much,
Yeah.
Madam, for calling on that key demands and also positioning Africa as a strong negotiators. So thank you all of our key participants. You have anchored your voices from the ground. It's hearing voices from women, from youth, from the indigenous groups, and then the CSO as well. Now, colleagues, allow me to take this back to our speakers, previous speakers, as they are also experts. I think several issues has been raised, and one of the key issues was who is coordinating us in key moments in global processes. And I know we are preparing for the second World Social Summit, but for the COP30, I know for the COP30 we have a picture here, but we would love to hear another organization also coordinating us in the G20 and in the second World Social Summit, and maybe GCAP can do for the social for the second World Social Summit. Philip, you have not more than 2 minutes.
Hello,
Here.
please, can you give me just 1 minute? I have very important
Please,
thing
we
that
are
which has
out
not.
of time. Can you please drop a message in a
But
chat
I
and
raised
then
my
you get
hand.
a reaction? Yeah,
Yes,
I know,
please.
but we're out of
1
time and our
minute. 1
interpreters
minute. I
need
just
to
want to raise
leave.
1 minute.
Affirmative action,
Not
Nuru. Just do
Yes.
affirmative action. I don't think we had many comments from men. Just do an affirmative action.
Okay,
Proceed.
okay. Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Hello, everybody. I'm James Ore from Kenya, Marsabit, coming from a pastoral background. And I think what I wanted to say is that Africa has been, we have accepted to be abused. Like when and I want to ask our sisters to forgive me, that when somebody is continuously abused, he has to accept that that's the condition. I think the West have continued to abuse Africa, and it's time
All of
for
us
us to.
unmute, please. All of us unmute and allow the speakers to be.
And I think we have been being robbed continuously for a long time, including innovation, including our resources. What I wanted to bring out is that what I wanted to bring is that
Jean Claude, please mute.
Can you mute, please?
Yeah. Hello. Who is now?
Please continue. Plagati, please
Yeah, okay.
ask you to mute all of the speakers so as we can hear the current speaker. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think I said Africa, we have accepted to be abused, like when somebody is continuously abused and you accept that condition. That's where we are. And it's a high time for us to say no. Especially some of these structural or debt trap are being perpetuated by World Bank, IMF, this international body. And then they then again bring reports. They produce reports of the issues of poverty and the climate loss and damage through climate change. I think it's high time for us to stand and say no. This is the problem with us, that even our leaders have no courage to stand and say we are no longer accept this. And the West depend on Africa because the raw material is, we are like the producers, the farmers who produce produce for the industries. That is the situation we are currently as pastoralists in northern Kenya. We are again faced by green energy colonization and green energy colonization through transitional mining of mineral for green energy and wind energy. And that means dispossession. That is means dispossession of land, displacing, affecting people's livelihoods, and even injecting more poverty, destitutes to in Africa. I think Africa, we don't need to beg any we don't need to beg. I think it's a high time to be abusive.
James, thanks for sharing this very key highlights and concern from the pastoristic group connecting it to decolonization of Africa and making it one of the key demands. Now, colleagues, let's go to the reaction. Philip, please, you have not more than 2 minutes for the reaction, so as we can go to the way forward since we're out of time. Thanks. Madam Memory, if you also have any reaction, please prepare. We give you a minute to react before we go to the next session, closing session. Thanks.
Thank you, Noor. I think in such situation and sticking to 1 minute, I'll try to be top line in terms of response. So I'll tie a number of things together. The first, of course, is around Africa position on G20 and COP30. For COP30, I'll quickly make reference to the declaration from the Second African Climate Summit. That will be quite pivotal in terms of framing Africa position for COP30, but more usefully make reference to the statement that came from the conference on climate change and development in Africa, the 13th edition. That is in UNECA's website. Those two should be able to give you a bit of pivotal elements of what it will be about. But Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance has been part of our transition. We are farming up our position from a non-state actors perspective, and you will hear us convening in the next few days, largely to discuss more about that position and to ensure that there is a significant buy-in. Please note the CCDA position. The CCDA statement and the position from the declaration from the Second African Climate Summit, again, were influenced with inputs from across 16 clusters of representation, including the youth, the women, and the rest. So if you are not in that particular frame, we encourage you to be part of that particular process, because essentially we want to organize a space for non-state actors for effective action. Regarding COP20, definitely I shared a bit of snapshot around it, but again, in terms of the overall leadership for Africa, for COP30, that will be led by the African Union and largely South Africa. Remember, G20. Remember, G20 is an official space, not that formal space in terms of its construction, and therefore we only have 2 member parties, which are basically the African Union Commission, who are now entering the G20, and the South Africa. South Africa must be having their own concrete position. So if you want to really understand the position that is being advanced there, look at the position that South Africa is actually advancing, but also look at the position that is being advanced by African Union, if at all it will be public, because by last week, but one, it was not formal. But in our consultation, because we held a consultation in South Africa, we again mirrored the aspiration of the SES2 declaration as what needs to be submitted in G20. But there are some other critical issues that we need to be cognizant about. That again, one, Africa is being invited into a space where we have historical polluters. So we are joining a club of historical polluters. So I'm not too sure whether we are having a joint undertaking within that space, or it's basically advancing the African position within the commitments that the big polluters will actually advance in that particular space. There were other important contributions in this regard beyond the positions that are being advanced. The question of conflict, just transition, among others, I think is a fundamental issue that we need not lose sight of in terms of our engagement. Remember, climate change is worsening and is layering on existing patterns of insecurities. But equally, the just transition agenda within climate response measures is also worsening insecurities. So how are we positioning ourselves within that conundrum? If you look at a country like Zaire, I'm not a diplomat, so I can mention countries explicitly. You begin to see a pattern through which response measures to climate change, the global pursuit to secure critical minerals, is again worsening the existing conflicts and leading to more vulnerabilities of women. How are we working along with this and on these matters? Remember the position of Africa, and this will be my last point, because again, I think the rest will be taken by other parties. Remember, even when we talk about advancing our global influence, Africa is as fragmented as any other region, But Africa is more fragmented because foreign interests are in play in Africa. Any position that you advance, you will find a lot of internal competition within Africa in terms of what the position is, first and foremost. And you find a lot of, again, complacence from an accountability point of view, where, again, I'll not call them member states, but I'll call them the political leadership in each of the specific country is safeguarding their personal interest as opposed to the collective interest of the nation and the collective interest of the continent. And therefore, we need to begin looking at how are we engaging within the climate and economic justice campaign. Are we going to engage the global, or are we going to ensure that we have uniformity in African voice? And that when Africa is pursuing reforms in the global financial architecture, then debt cancellation, among other things, that there is uniformity and equal push from all the heads of states, not just one or two heads of state. As it is, what we are seeing is just one or two heads of states pushing a very pivotal agenda for the continent, yet it should be actually a collective responsibility for all the African heads of states in terms of global push, but then also coming back home and fixing accountability systems. So let me stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Philip, for reaction, especially reminding us as Africa, how are we positioning ourselves to these global processes, but to the need to have a collective interest as a region, not individual interest. To you, Madam Memory, if there is any reaction from you, especially on a gender perspective, thanks.
I think she left.
Okay, thanks. If there's no reaction, I expect a reaction from Memory and Philip. No reaction more. Colleagues, I think it has been a quite a very insightful session, especially hearing from, the voices of the local communities from South Africa, from West, from East, from Central as well. And the key message on this, I think it has been a thread of cancer or restructured and sustainable debts, and also rising offense to social spending. But throughout delivering grant-based climate financing for adaptation and loss and damage have been key, and also this positioning it to should be to community-led project, but echoing voice on universal social protection of law in every African countries has been very reflected in this conversation as well. But we also heard colleagues mentioning on the UN Tax Convention and the forms of the global financial architecture, the special targeting the IMF and the World Bank, but they need to protect the civic space and environmental defenders. But we heard also voices on thematic groups, especially the women group, the women and feminist group, or the indigenous communities, but we also heard it from the pastoralist groups, and these are key. And one of the issues which were raised was who is leading what? Thank you to Pacture. We will be leading on issues of climate, and we take up. We will try to read. We read the civil society voices in the Second World Social Summit, and we have 2 events set for in the Second World Social Summit. We are taking all of these voices to the global processes. Now moving forward, and closing, colleagues, all of the demands are being taken as almost there have been 5 speakers anchoring on having a collective voices from this webinar, from this conversation. We are going to have a statement which will be shared to all of you on our position as you are and sharing your key demands to the World Social Summit, to the COP30, and to the G20 in Africa. Colleagues, thank you all for joining. Now we should end today and stay connected as this conversation continues to the global processes. Allow me also to thank our interpreters today. We have Hector, Lalisa, and Lisa, who has done a very great job to make sure that everyone is connected and nobody is left behind. And we continue with the economic and the climate justice campaign. And we are carrying this message to Doha in the World Social Summit, and to Belém as well, to COP30, and to Joburg for the G20. And we thank Madam from Nigeria for allowing to connect with the colleagues who want to participate in the COP30. And this conversation continues. And allow me now for today to close the session, and we keep moving forward and pushing these demands. Don't forget, this is a week of action. Let's continue pushing for the key demands as IMF and World Bank are holding their meeting right now. Let's keep pushing for the climate and economic justice campaign. And as also this is a week of action, demanding strongly and unapologetically demanding for the reforms of international financial architecture. Thanks, and it was great having you all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hi, Nuru. Just a second.
Yes. No.
Nuru, Ingo has raised his hands. One thing.
Something, yeah.
Colleagues, please don't leave. There is a reservation. Please don't leave. There is a reservation. Yes, Ingo, do you want to say
so
something?
everyone is requested to open their videos after the call is after Ingo is over. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, please don't leave. So sorry, Ingo, I didn't see your hand. Checking the floor. As Ingo is taking the floor, just for a minute, Ingo. Colleagues, please, we want to take a group photo, and I know almost half have already left. Please, please share, please allow your video for us to take a photo. Please, Pragati, can you allow everybody to allow a video? Yeah, thanks. Everybody to allow it. Ingo, you can go ahead as Pragati is taking a good photo.
Thank you very much to Nuro, Philip, and everybody for this very good assembly. It was really interesting, very important point raised. I just wanted to mention that this your points and perspectives will be brought also to the Global People's Assembly event for the World Social Summit, which will be on 29th October, also online at 1 p.m. GMT. So we invite everybody to join this event and also to bring your perspectives in there. I think there will be an invitation sent to all participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingo. I think everybody is sharing the video now. Pragat, please let me know if I've already taken a photo.
Yes.
Yes, and there is a Global People's Assembly. I know so many of you wanted to share your thoughts, but you couldn't because of the limited time. So we will share the invitation on 29th, which will be the Global People's Assembly. And this conversation continues and doesn't end. Thank you. I'm wishing you a very good day. And it was so nice having you in today's discussion. Bye. And a big thumb up to all of our speakers and contributors. Bye-bye.
254-719-321.